I never thought that I would speak so openly about my mental illness. I never thought that I would have to advocate for the acceptance of my mental illness. Generally, mental illness is stigmatized. People with mental illness are marginalized. It's not something people tend to talk about. And yet, I am defending my mental illness. And I know that sounds kind of crazy. And maybe it is, because I am kind of crazy. But I am in a position now of defending my mental illness because there are people who are trying to suggest that my mental illness is actually not a mental illness. They are trying to suggest that someone can be born in the wrong body. And to me, that's ludicrous and absurd. And it also harms those of us who have had any kind of gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia or disconnect with our bodies. Because if we can blame our bodies for our problems, that feeds into our mental health issues. That's exactly what we want to do. Those of us with these kinds of mental health issues want to blame our bodies. We hate our bodies. We blame them for our problems. We hurt our bodies. All of these are indicative of a mental health issue and suggest someone could use help from a therapist or other mental health provider. And yet, trans activists are saying, no, 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 no. Hating your body, harming your body, being disconnected from your body is a natural and normal thing because you've been born into the wrong body. That is crazy. As someone who has struggled with mental illness, I can let you know it's not a good idea to affirm someone who is mentally ill, to affirm their delusions. It is not healthy. It would be like telling an alcoholic, hey, you know, your body wants a drink, go ahead and have a drink. Or telling an anorexic, you know, you think you're fat? You're fat. Go on a diet, lady. And those are behaviors that could be deadly. They do not promote healthy thinking. They do not promote functional thinking. They're delusional. My body is not to blame for the problems that I've had. I've been thinking a lot about gender dysphoria as I started to talk publicly about my experience with gender dysphoria as a child, and starting to learn a lot about the different causes of gender dysphoria. And it got me thinking about my personality and gender roles. And I believe that I developed gender dysphoria as a result of a sexual assault when I was a young child. But I've been thinking about why. And I don't think it was just the sexual assault, because children are sexually assaulted on a regular basis, unfortunately. It's all too common. But not all children who are sexually assaulted develop gender dysphoria. So I've been thinking a lot about why that's how I responded to it, why that was a coping mechanism that worked for me. And I think it's because I was already fairly non-traditional in how I was as a girl. I was definitely a tomboy. I was definitely different from most girls. The reason I thought about this is the other day I was on the phone with someone and I told them how cool my phone number is. And the reason it's so cool is because the last 4 digits are 5236. And as soon as I got that phone number when I got my new phone, as soon as I got that phone number, I was excited because immediately I saw this neat pattern that 2 plus 3 equals 5 and 2 times 3 equals 6. And that just delighted me. And most women probably wouldn't be thinking like that. So I think my brain has always been set up to be a little bit different. The person on the phone I was talking to when I was so excited about my phone number asked me if I was an engineer, which I think is kind of interesting. And I'm not an engineer. But the other thing that happened is when I dialed that phone number, I realized that it was even cooler because not only did it have an internal pattern, but when you dial it, it has a pattern. And these are ways of thinking that are different from the way most girls are socialized to be. So even as a young child, I tended to have, I was gender non-conforming, I guess is how you'd call it. I was a weird kid. I didn't fit in particularly well. But before the sexual assault, I was mostly happy. I never thought of myself as being a boy. I just knew I was different, and that was okay. So when the sexual assault happened, it's not surprising that my brain kind of made this leap to, I'm going to be a boy. There's another reason that I think it might have happened that I think is fairly unusual in my case. In my case, my brother was with me when I was being sexually assaulted, and he wasn't sexually assaulted, and I was. And so in my mind, that makes sense. Another reason why I would become a boy, another reason why I'd want to be a boy. And again, not all kids who are sexually assaulted develop gender dysphoria, but it's a common reason why people develop gender dysphoria. So I really think it's important that we talk about these gender roles, because a lot of girls now are getting the message that if they deviate from traditional gender roles, they have gender dysphoria and they should transition. And as a child, I was dyslexic, which is unusual for girls. Girls tend not to have dyslexia. I also was diagnosed with ADHD, which again tends to be, especially when I was a kid, the psychiatrist who diagnosed me said that I was the first girl he had ever diagnosed with ADHD. So I was a non-traditional girl. I have never understood clothing. I get very frustrated when I shop because all I care about is the color and how it feels on me. And if I find a shirt or a skirt or a sweater or socks or underwear that feel right, I will buy a whole bunch of them. And I almost wear the same thing every day. Not the same exact thing, but the same, it's like a uniform, because I have a really hard time figuring out what to wear. I have no sense of fashion. I hate shopping. I don't do makeup. I don't understand hair. In fact, my hair is kind of crazy today because it was bugging me and I cut it myself. And this is something that most women don't do. Most women would go to a hairdresser. So I am a non-gender conforming woman. And it's hard to know how much of that is because I had gender dysphoria and I was determined to be a boy as a child. And it might have rewired my brain somewhat. I wasn't socialized in the same way as other girls. I was busy doing everything I could to prove I was a boy and acting in ways that I felt indicated that I was a boy, which again are very stereotypical. So I was verbally aggressive. I was physically aggressive. I remember getting chewed out by PE teachers because I was so aggressive the other girls didn't want to play with me. My nickname when I was in 5th and 6th grade was Erin Underarmstrong because I was constantly challenging boys to arm wrestles. These are not the way most girls behave. In addition, I had some really dysfunctional behavior because I hated my body so much because it was a female body, because it had been vulnerable and violated. So I did a lot of self-harming behaviors. I also did things like trying to practice peeing standing up so that I could pass as a boy. I took up hobbies like shooting a rifle that are much more traditionally boy hobbies. I really did not do anything I can think of that was considered traditionally female other than baking because I love cookies. And so I learned how to bake so I could make my own cookies. And that is really the only traditional female gender behavior that I had as a kid. So the problem with the transgender narrative is that if children are gender non-conforming, it is now assumed that they are transgender and should be transitioned. And this is really damaging to both boys and girls. My daughter, when she was a little girl, wanted to try wearing boxer shorts like a friend of hers had. He had these cute little, they're called underoos, and they had characters on them, and she wanted to try them, and I let her. Now, these days, if she went to school with those on in elementary school and a teacher saw her, that teacher might assume she's transgender rather than just a girl who wanted to see what it was like to wear boys' undies. So I feel like it's really important that we get away from these gender roles and gender stereotypes so that girls like I was are not labeled as transgender or are not so it's not suggested that we have to act in stereotypical behaviors. And again, as an adult, I am very different from most women. I have a really hard time maintaining friendships with women because I just don't get it. When a woman says, hey, let's get together for coffee, my first response is, because I don't even know what that means. I don't know what the expectations are. I don't know what that person wants from me. Whereas if a guy says, hey, do you want to get coffee? I'm like, sure. Because I'm very comfortable talking with men. I'm very comfortable. I feel like I understand men more than women. I feel like my brain is maybe more traditional, stereotypically masculine, because we could talk about how much we hate shopping. We can talk about documentaries and how much we hate chick flicks. We can talk about things that guys talk about, like what I'm growing in the garden or the next project I'm working on. I don't understand the whole concept of getting together with the girls. I've never really fit that mold. And I have had a few female friends growing up. I had one very close female friend when I was in 7th grade, and we used to wrestle. And that was what we did, and I loved it. We did things that were very non-stereotypical female behavior. Like, one of the things that we did was one night we went out, and again, this is 7th grade, and we were on swings, and for some reason we decided to have a contest to see who could poop off the swing and make the poop fly the furthest. And I suspect most girls don't have contests like that. However, I've heard boys talking about having contests similar to that, like pee contests. So my friend who I played with and did a lot of non-stereotypical female behaviors with in 7th grade has grown up, and she is definitively a woman. She has kids. She's a mother. I have grown up. I am a mother. I am a woman. If at any point during our childhoods we have been told, you are a boy, you are in the wrong body, I can't even describe to you how damaging that is. So one of the things that I've learned through therapy, one of the ways therapists have helped me, is to resolve the conflict I have with my body. And I can tell when I'm becoming mentally unhealthy because I start self-harming. I start depriving myself of food. I start physically banging my arms and legs against hard surfaces to cause bruising. I start banging my head to cause contusions. These are behaviors that are a signal to me that something's wrong and I need help. These are behaviors that are part of the dysphoria I have, part of the disconnect I have. And it's sort of a fallback position. It's part of my PTSD, I guess. So when things are really stressing me, that's when I start reverting back to dysphoric feelings and hating my body. And I don't know exactly why. I'm sure the therapists understand more than I do. But if during those times when I'm feeling very dysphoric and very hateful to my body, if I go to my therapist and they affirm my self-hatred, and they affirm my dysphoria, and they say, yes, there is something wrong with your body, that is promoting dysfunction. That is promoting harmful thinking. And that is exactly the kind of thinking that trans activists are suggesting that we legislate, that we require therapists to affirm children, that we require parents and teachers to affirm a child's dysphoric feelings. The reason that I think it's incredibly important for therapists to have the latitude to work with children who have gender dysphoria, to challenge their dysphoria, and to not be required to affirm their dysphoria, is that dysphoria as a symptom can be incredibly protective of a child. As in my case, it helped me to manage my sexual assault in a way that allowed me to continue to function. I didn't talk to therapists about my sexual assault until I was much older. My mom, my stepdad, and my brother knew about it, and the men who did it to me knew about it, and I knew about it. But I didn't realize that my dysphoria was caused by it, so I didn't talk about it because I was so embarrassed and ashamed of what had happened to me. I was mortified and horrified, and I felt like it was my fault. I felt like talking about it, I couldn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it. It was a shameful secret. It was, it's still hard for me to talk about it. But at the time when I was a little kid, I did not talk about it. I was embarrassed. So if I had gone to a therapist after my assault and said, I'm a boy, I'm in the wrong body, and they affirmed it, I would never have gotten the opportunity to talk about the sexual assault. I would never have been able to process it. And so as I got older and my mental health issues got more profound, and it was obvious that I needed help because I was aggressive, because I was self-harming, because I believed I was a boy, I went to therapy and was able to slowly, extremely slowly, uncover the fact that that sexual assault had traumatized me to the core. That I hated my body because of what happened to me. That I blamed myself for what happened. All of those feelings are crippling. And if I hadn't had an opportunity to process those feelings, to see that they were the cause of my dysphoria, I don't think that I would ever have gotten more functional. I would have been put in a path towards the cyclical, dysfunctional thinking where I blamed my body because I was in the wrong body, and I would hate my body, and I would want to self-harm my body, and I would want to change my body, and I would never have gotten to the point where I realized that hating my body was not my body's fault. It wasn't my fault. It was a response to what had happened to me. I don't think we want kids to feel like their bodies are to blame when they feel this kind of gender dysphoria. And I understand that there are all different kinds of reasons why children develop dysphoria. But it's important for children to have the opportunity to process the reason that they're feeling dysphoric. Because there are cases where children develop gender dysphoria for something really silly, like a new baby came home who's the opposite gender, and that baby's getting all the attention. So in a 2-year-old's mind, they think, if I am the gender of the new baby, then I'll get attention too. And there are cases where parents clearly have a preference for one gender, and a child will try to be that gender to get the approval and acceptance of a parent. And I've talked to people who have done this, children who are my age now. And if they had been children now, if they were children these days, they would have been told they were transgender and encouraged to transition. We are encouraging dysfunction, and we are embracing the idea that gender dysphoria is a normal and natural thing, which it is not. It is not normal for someone to feel that kind of dis-ease with their body. And I know this because there are times when I feel at ease with my body, and there are times when I don't. And when I am healthiest and most functional is when I feel most comfortable in my body. So that kind of disconnect and dysphoria is a symptom of a mental health issue that needs to be addressed. And it's not, and transitioning is actually, encouraging a child to transition is actually stifling the opportunity to talk about that dysphoria. It is actually reinforcing the delusional ideas that a child has that there is something wrong with their body. That is not what therapists are trained to do. If we legislate that therapists have to affirm a child's dysphoria, we are legislating that therapists have to lie, that therapists have to promote dysfunctional thinking, that therapists have to accept self-harming behaviors. The more that transgender activists try to suggest that you can be born in the wrong body, the more damage it does to those of us who are fighting for sanity, fighting for reality, fighting to be functional. Because it's like giving a drink to an alcoholic. It's like, just have one drink. Just imagine your body is wrong. And you kind of put that seed of doubt in there. And then the person who has those tendencies towards gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia, it just kind of feeds that idea. Oh, yeah, it is my body. You're right. I'm born in the wrong body. If I change my body, everything will be fine. And it gives them license to self-harm. Doing things like binding breasts is dangerous. Taking cross-gender hormones is damaging. And indulging in these fantasies that everything will be better if I could just be in a different body is delusional and dangerous. So I'm upset about the transgender activists because I feel like they're actually harming people's mental health. They're encouraging children to hate their bodies, to believe there's something wrong with them. And all of this is actually really disempowering because it's suggesting that there's nothing you can do about your dysphoria and your mental health issues because your body's wrong. And whenever you suggest that a person has no power over their problem tends to get worse, and they tend to feel disempowered. So empowering someone who has a mental health issue by saying, you have this issue, but there are things you can do to overcome it. We can help you to become more functional. We can provide you with skills so that you can manage or overcome your dysphoric feelings and your dysmorphic feelings. Those are all very empowering. But telling someone, sorry, you are in the wrong body and there's nothing you can do about it, is disempowering. Feeling empowered and feeling like, hey, wait a minute, I can change my thinking. I can change how I view my body. I can change how I think about my problems. Those are very functional ways of thinking. Those are empowering ways of thinking. Those are healthy ways of thinking. So if we encourage children to believe that they can be born in the wrong body, we are encouraging a really disempowering way of thinking. And I hope that we can encourage children instead to say, no, you're not in the wrong body. You might have some issues and we can help you with those. But you can overcome these issues without becoming addicted to cross-gender hormones that are going to cause you lifelong problems, that are going to cause your body harm. You can overcome these problems and learn to love your body just how it is.